Bob, it's been a great Target ALS annual meeting. Have you been enjoying?
Absolutely. It's so great to see everyone in person again. Fantastic meeting so far, and I'm sure it'll continue throughout the rest of the day and tomorrow.
Yeah.
So very exciting.
Yeah. You know, recently we launched with you a very exciting new scientific core. For individuals who are watching at home, they may not know what a scientific core is. How would you explain it?
Yeah, it's really, Target ALS has been very supportive in providing resources to the research community. So our core, and this new one is a longitudinal biofluids core, is critically important for helping researchers around the world gain more insights into mechanisms, look at biomarkers for the disease. And so what Target ALS is providing funding for is a multi-site study collecting longitudinal blood, CSF, urine, all linked to detailed clinical information, and even at-home measures on speech and respiratory function that will all be linked with all that information and with whole genome sequencing, and then made immediately and readily available to the research community.
And that really can't be overstated, because previously we had access to postmortem tissue, right?
Correct.
And the challenge with postmortem is it's obviously after death, and there's only so much that you can learn right at that point. So can you explain a little bit, because of longitudinal, and we want people to understand the science behind it, what is the benefit of longitudinal data and all these other measures that you're now going to get, the picture you're going to get that's different than when we only had the postmortem tissue?
Yeah, it will be a much more complete picture of the lifespan of a disease within an individual. And so we'll be able to look at what's changed maybe early on, right near diagnosis, at the point of that diagnosis. And then very importantly, how do changes in biofluids, it could be metabolites, it could be proteins, etc., how do they change over time in an individual? So if we have a drug that we're trying to target a pathway with, we need to know anything that we're going to look at in an individual patient. What's its normal lifespan? How does it change over time, so that we can properly interpret the clinical data during that trial? And so it is a critically important resource in order to answer those really critical questions on what happens early, how does it change in individuals, and then how does any drug treatment impact that change over time?
Now, I'm not a scientist, but I know about biomarkers, right? And then I always say it's sort of like a milestone. You sort of know where you are traveling, and being able to measure the disease right earlier and diagnose earlier. We don't have biomarkers for ALS. It's the eternal search, and we hope to discover them soon. Do you feel that the biofluid core offers sort of an alternative benefit with the longitudinal data? Is there any benefit there?
Well, yeah. So everyone doing biomarker research, including my lab, you often look at a single time point. So you get what's called a cross-sectional analysis of any potential biomarker candidate. The longitudinal nature of this study then allows that ability to look over time within a single individual, collecting that information, and then comparing multitude of individuals or patients over time, and ask how does that change. And then critically, with our biofluids core, we're actually going to be collecting 2 time points, sort of time 0 and then 1 year later, on healthy individuals. And that's also critical, because we need to know any of these biomarker candidates that we're interested in, what's the level in a healthy control individual, and does that change over time as well? Yeah. So it's really going to help us address really critical key questions for both biomarker development, but also for drug development.
Sure. And we should put out somewhat of a PSA around control cases, that just as much as it's important that we get biofluid from ALS patients, it's critically important that we have it non-ALS patients.
Exactly. What do you compare it to?
Yeah. Exactly. So exactly. It's a wonderful gift to give to the research community to be a control case. I wanted to ask you, the scientific cores overall. So individuals watching may not know what a scientific core is or what it provides. We were founded 8 years ago, and we heard from the research community what was necessary, and what we heard was that they lacked access to tools and resources. That they could get the research to a certain point, but then you might need validation that you don't have the access to the tool to do so.
Correct.
So, as a scientist, what do you think about the cores that Target ALS has built and the benefit that it brings to our research community in advancing the work?
Yeah, no, they've been incredibly valuable over this, you could say 8-9 years, but it's actually been a short period of time.
Yeah, sure.
And they've been built up, and obviously the numbers of investigators around the world that are using Target ALS generated resources. It could be genomics information, it could be post-mortem tissues, it soon will be our biofluids core. That has led to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of publications, obviously facilitated investigators writing their own grants and getting all that preliminary data they need and to support their hypotheses. And so it's been a really critical tool for the research community worldwide, and has really enabled and accelerated research in ALS.
Yeah, and we heard from them that longitudinal data was critically important, and you're bringing that resource, which
exactly
is so important.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And, I'm glad to be able to share what we do at Target ALS and the resources we provide to scientists so that they can do their work more effectively.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.